Welcome to the Art of Faith podcast. I'm Joshua Kapczynski, and this is a production of Granite Creek Studios, where we have a couple other shows, and then one in the works on film, and that's going to be an exciting one. So just stay posted for our next exciting new show. Today's topic, I'm doing a series on who is Jordan Peterson, a public figure, a clinical psychologist. Last time I heard, he was tenured at University of Toronto, but they're trying to kick him out for that. And he has said things that have upset the woke talking points, saying things that are very logical and consistent and healthy psychologically. And I believe he's got important things to say to the church. And today we are on rule number 6, which is set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. This is such a great message for the church because church folk, myself included, we love to be armchair critics, where we'll look at society, we'll look at the world, and we'll point out all of these horrible things that are going on, and then we'll judge from afar. Some of the beautiful things about social media and the internet revolution is that everybody has a voice, everybody has a platform. So I think that's a positive. The bad thing about the internet revolution is that everybody has a voice and everybody has a platform. So not everybody needs to be saying something. I think it's great that everybody has the opportunity to speak their mind. That is a human right. It's essential for our nation. But sometimes we can have too many talking heads. And so we as Christians have got to be careful about how much we do criticize. Let me bring up one social subject that it's been in the news. We've been talking about it for a long time, and that is the issue of homosexuality or same-sex marriage. I mean, this has been going on in modern church let me see. When Prop 8 came out, and I mean, it's just been complicated and it's been difficult. Now that the whole sexual identity thing is a big deal in the news, and we're kicking against it, and some of the things that we should be kicking against because it's just not right. What I find interesting, and I believe that this is what Jordan is referring to in this rule, is have your house in perfect order before you begin to criticize the world. One of the things that I noticed, specifically when Prop 8 came out, because that was the legalization of gay marriage in the state of California. And initially it failed by popular vote. So the citizens shot the idea down by popular vote. And then the Supreme Court of California kind of went over the will of the people and pushed it on through, which that's not a democratic gesture, by the way. That was the rule of the elite, and but now it's completely normal in our state and in our country that it's just normalized. It's not an issue. People don't really like. If we were to take another popular vote, so it's probably another conversation for another day. But if we were to take another popular vote, if same-sex marriage is something good for society, everybody would say yes. But back in 2007, so not that long ago, relatively, everybody said no, it's a bad idea. Like popular vote, popular opinion. So the world's changing. But when that topic first came out in the news, and then when we were voting on it, a lot of people, a lot of Christians really got up in arms about the whole concept of legalizing same-sex marriage. Like there were some angry people, and they wanted to protest and they wanted to sign petitions. And I'm not saying that their intentions were wrong. Um, the the intention and the response was right. But here is what I know behind the scenes is that everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but I found it ironic that some of the most vocal people against same-sex marriage in my church had the worst marriages, and they had the worst personal lives. And that's the heart of what Peterson is getting down to. And so it's just it's almost hypocritical for us to, let's just say we want to define what marriage is, when we don't love our wives, or it the the divorce rate for Christians is just as high. Some studies even say is even higher than the secular rate for divorce. So it's just like, before we become experts on marriage, we probably should get it right. We should probably model what good marriage is. And another thing that I've noticed in um, modern Christendom in Southern California is a lot of young people, they're not super motivated to get married. Like it's not a huge value. They might, they know that they need to do it. They don't want to be alone. So there's that aspect. Large majority of people are living together before they get married. I mean, rarely are people abstaining before they get married. I do a lot of weddings. I did 50 weddings last year. Not a single one of them were abstaining, and most of them were living together. If they weren't living together, it was just because of out of necessity. Somebody who was in the military or something like that. So the world has changed, and pretty radically and pretty quick. But I think if we're going to say marriage is a God-given and sacrament, and it's a beautiful thing, like it needs to be modeled to the point where like people want to do it. Like they see the church and they see people married and respecting each other and loving each other, and they want that. They're going to desire that. See, that's where true change comes from, is when people model something that is good, and that they model something that is healthy, and that they model something that God has designed. And so um, what I would say, and I believe what the biblical position would be, and what Jordan Peterson, again, a clinical psychologist, would say, like if you want to have wholesome, godly marriages in society, well, then model it first. Before you can, change a law, you've got to change your own house. And so it's such a brilliant idea. Uh, Ironically, Jordan Peterson does not quote Matthew 7:6, which is, if you see if you see a speck of dust in your brother's eye, don't go pick it out until you take the plank out of your own eye. So that's that whole bit of supposedly what's turning young people away from the church, and old people, everybody turns everybody away from the church, is the whole idea of hypocrisy. Like, okay, and we're not going to get our act together, but gosh, this is such a great rule, because it says, before you criticize the world, before you expend that energy on pointing out everything that's wrong with the world, uh, get your house in perfect order. And that's a tough one, I think, for most of us. In Titus, I think it's Titus 3. It's the qualifications for an elder, qualifications for a pastor or an elder or a leader in the church, somebody that is going to lead the church. And it says it's got to be a husband of one wife, and the children need to respect him. And then basically it just says, look, if you can't have your personal life and your personal, if you can't manage your personal house, then you really have no business at all managing a church or being a leader inside of a church. Now that, I mean, it seems like a no duh. The truth is, we're just not perfect people. And so this call for perfection is hard. At the same time, Jesus says, be ye perfect as I am perfect. And so we have to love the life that God has given us and strive to be perfect. No pressure, right? No, it's easier said than done. Peterson gets into this psychological issue as to why we do this, as to why either we're criticizing or judging. He pushes it even further than I would have thought just reading the chapter title. So if you read the chapter your title, we could probably just stop right there. But he peels back the onion in his psychological way. He uses his tools to boil down to what the heart of the issue is. And in this chapter, he's talking about the problem of evil, in essence. Like, that one is, okay, Peterson's not a theologian, but he's talking about the problem of evil in some very deep ways that, well, it can be confusing. It makes you stop. It makes you take a good hard look at yourself and how you perceive reality, how you view your life, if you are a positive person or a negative person. He will point out the obvious, that life is hard and life is unfair and life is brutally short, and like, these are some truths that we know. And then he'll go on to explain like how vicious and deadly life can be, and in the end, we're all going to die. So it's very pessimistic sounding in tone, but it's just honest and true, talking about how people are going, how a lot of us are going to suffer. We're going to suffer the death of loved ones. We're going to suffer illness, and it's just not going to make any sense. And in the midst of pain and suffering, like, how we respond, our posture, our internal spiritual, he doesn't say spiritual, but I'm going to say spiritual. Our internal spiritual posture is vital to growth, but it's also vital to, if we're going to live a life that is victorious. So let me explain. As he's talking about the problem of evil, he brings up, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, but he brings up the relationship between Cain and Abel. So Abel he's the favorite. He's the herdsman. In one podcast, I said that he's the hunter-gatherer. He's the one that is reliant upon what God has provided. He knows that everything that he has received is a gift from God, and in the form of the animal. And he offers a sacrifice. He gives something that's precious to him as a sacrifice, and it's a full sacrifice. In contrast, his brother Cain is the farmer. So he has a different perspective. He says that I did this. I grew this crop. This land is mine. So he has a sense of property. And then in Genesis, it says that when the time to come to sacrifice had happened, Cain gave only a portion. So he didn't give the full sacrifice. He gave the portion of it. Why? Because he was possessive of it, because it was his. And then here's the point. God accepts Abel's offering and he rejects Cain's offering. And so Cain responds with bitterness and with rage, and this is the first murder. So he murders his brother, and that's the response. And so why? Okay, so he's jealous, right? We all understand jealousy. We all understand being looked over for someone else, so the favorite. So those are all very real and natural emotions. But the thing, that the kicker that we need to get into is that he manifested murder towards God's creation. So he murdered not only his brother, but he kills God's creation. And so what Peterson is fleshing out is this disdain towards life, towards God's creation itself. Okay, so that is that's the hard look. So whenever we find ourselves in pain or overlooked or dealing with injustice, is there a disdain towards life and towards God? It's such an easy direction to head into, but we have to be very, very careful that we're not lashing out towards God in these areas. In literature, there's a famous play, and everybody knows it, at least through popular culture. The play is called Faust, and Faust is he's a German young man, and then he's tempted by the devil, Mephistopheles. So it's the archetypal temptation of a young man, and so the devil, or Mephistopheles, appears to Faust and says, "I will give you whatever you want. So whatever your heart's desire, I will give it to you as long as I can have your soul for eternity." And so the bargain. So this is where the devil, gives you the bargain. So in American culture, it's meeting the devil at the crossroads. And so this is why we have like awesome musicians and blues musicians. And so Johnson, what's his name? Not Don Johnson. That's the Miami Vice guy. It's not Jack Johnson. Shoot. Anyway, America's most famous blues man he said that the reason why he was so good at creating the blues riffs and the culture and all that, the pioneer of blues music, is because he literally sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. And so, pick your favorite rock and roll band. Let's just assume that they sold their soul to the devil so that they could get all the fame and all the money and all the prestige here and now. But they're going to die. And when they do, then the devil gets their soul. So this is the story of Faust. And so Mephistopheles, the devil, says that he is the adversary of being. That is really who the devil is, the adversary of being or of existence. Like, he just hates everything that God has created. Like, he knows it's cool. He knows he knows it gives God glory, and he hates every bit of it. The devil is the spirit that negates, that wants to undo, that wants to lash out. Jordan uses some powerful illustrations in highlighting this. And so this destructive force that wants to kill, steal, and destroy, the destructive force that wants to vandalize and rape just because you can. It is evil in its pure form. Jordan will highlight that one of the base expressions of that would be mass shootings. And so he highlights that how many mass shootings that we've had, and there's a similar theme for a person that wants to go on the tirade where he wants to kill everybody. There's a psychological and a spiritual dysfunction there that wants to kill God's creation, and then in turn wants to take their own life. They see life as not being valuable, not worth living, but also disdainable. And so that's the impulse that does that. Like you and I probably don't understand the heart and the mind of a mass shooter, but that, if we're not careful, that darkness is it's in us, and we have to make sure that we don't act out in ways where we're criticizing to the point where we've fallen into bitterness. So the mass shooter is just somebody that's criticized to the point of bitterness until it's full blown and exactly what the devil wants to do with destruction. So his solution, again, it goes back to that Matthew 7 concept. Before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, let's take the log out of your own eye. And he'll highlight how in Soviet era Russia, how despicably evil it was, how you had Stalin and Lenin, who each of them killed more people than Hitler in mass murder. I mean, it's just like humanity at its darkest was Soviet era communism in Russia. I'm sure it's bad now, but systematically it was worse because it was a state ran institution. And Solzhenitsyn, one of the writers, he was a card carrying, nation loving communist. He was all on board. He was a party man. And then when he saw how badly his country was falling apart under the communist regime, under an atheistic society that took the goodness of God out of everything and just made it a utilitarian state ran by an authoritarian dictator, he rebelled against it, and he wrote Gulag Archipelago, and that just highlights how terrible everything was. And his response was like he clearly couldn't fix this evil machine. Like he couldn't criticize it and make it better. But what he did is he did highlight it, but he focused on making himself a better person, and he devoted himself, disciplining himself to write this book. And in that book came to free nations, came to America, came to other free nations. Of course, it was banned in Russia or in the Soviet blocs, and but it changed the world. And so, what does it mean for us to make an impact in society in the ways that the Bible wants us to do it? And I think that the way that Peterson is ripping off from Scripture, I mean that kindly. I don't mean he's not ripping it off, but it's just surprisingly how biblical his themes are. What do we? Okay, look. There's a lot of things I just want to troll people all day long on the internet. I want to highlight all these horrible things that are going on in politics. I want to highlight all these horrible things that are taking place in in our cultural revolution. And so, how do you respond? Well, I think if I want to see the family unit, the nuclear family unit and marriage reformed, well, I just need to have an awesome marriage and an awesome family. Like that's what I can do. I can do that one thing. I can make more of a profound difference on managing my home than I can trashing some special interest group online. Like I got real agency. I've got real power to make a difference if I just get my own family in perfect order. Um, let's just say that you don't like the state of the economy, like you just and we've got good reason, right? Food prices are on the rise, gas prices are up and down, roller coaster ride. Like we've got a lot of things that we can complain about um, in terms of the economy. Rightfully so. It's just painful. It's painful to look at the bank accounts these days. So, what's the proper response? Like you could spend hours complaining about the economy, or you could find some creative ways to pinch some pennies, or some to do some side hustle to make a few extra bucks. Like, and that will make a difference. Like you just order your life differently. Like you have to be um, reflective, but you also have to be able to move and to pivot at a moment's notice. And if everybody was living their life at a frugal way, if everyone was watching what they said and how they said it, then um, society would take notice. We really love to pick on politics. Now, this is an idea and a debate that I should probably have somebody come on and talk to me about this one, or have a conversation about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Does policy dictate what culture and society is, or do the people just elect what their values are? And so that's a tough question. That's the chicken or the egg question. But I believe that political parties and the people that we elect, they reflect what we want. And so, in order to do that, we have to change ourselves first, and then that will follow shortly after. All right. So Peterson goes from highlighting, this very complex topic of the problem of evil. Like, we live in a fallen and broken world, and it's bad, and it's not getting any better. So we can respond by sticking our head in the sands and pretending that everything's okay. We can respond by just partying down and eat, drink, and be merry, and for tomorrow we die. We can respond just by checking out. So you could just medicate yourself till you don't feel anything, or just eventually check out altogether. Or you can in this you can be very proactive, and you can just burn it all down, and like that's the burning down the empire, watching it burn and restarting it up again. Like, that's the same mentality that the mass shooters have. So we don't want any of those. But what we do want is this. These are very big problems that we can't solve. But what we can solve is our own self. So saying things that build us up, doing things, behavior that is positive behavior that makes us better people. If there is something, uh, that one thing that you're doing that you should not be doing. And the beautiful thing about the Bible, it talks about this too. Paul says, like, I have no idea why I do the things that I ought not to do. Like, I don't want to do these things, but I do them anyway. And he's being very transparent. And so let's just think about that. What's that thing that you do that you just don't want to do anymore? You shouldn't do it, but you keep on doing it. Peterson's kind of a jerk because he says, look, you know what that thing is, so stop doing it now. And he's just brutally honest, but he's brave in ways that we just need to hear. And I think that the reason why his voice is being heard through different channels is because he's lived it. He's done hard things himself, and he's challenged himself, and he's challenged the status quo, and you know he's getting his house in perfect order. So, thank you for listening. This is probably a shorter one, but we'll just end with that. Like, what's one thing that you can do today that will make you a better person, that will get your house in order? Your temptation is going to want to criticize and to tear down and destroy what's going on in the world that you don't like, and I get that impulse. But instead of responding to that, let's just spend our energy on making ourselves better and becoming more like Christ, and obeying his commands, which is, again, this is take this big giant plank out of your eye before we start picking specks out of other people's eyes, and we'll be perceived less hypocritical. And I think that we will attract more people to the gospel. The kingdom will be advanced. Um, Transformation of culture and society will take place once it takes place in the home. So thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time when we do rule number 7. God bless. Take care. Peace.